weeks of the year, we revisit the best of the Solari Report. We want to make sure you have an opportunity to hear these outstanding discussions before the year is over. In the week before Christmas, we will publish 4 of our favorite weekly interviews, chosen for their insights to help you be successful in 2020. We start with my interview in March 2019 in Switzerland with Thomas Meyer on the Story of Gideon. The Story of Gideon is my favorite Bible story. I often tell the story whenever someone asks me, "What can I do?" In 2018, I shared the Gideon story with Thomas. To my delight, he immediately went to Judges chapter 6 to 9 in the Old Testament and read it. His insights inspired this in-depth discussion of Gideon and why this story offers intelligence so relevant to these times.
Many people have spiritual experiences today, but they are naive. So they can be, even if they have spiritual experiences, easily be manipulated into illusions, deception, this and that. So we have a story that I'm glad that you pointed me to in the Old Testament by a man who has a mission to save his people, Gideon. And one of the striking things for me was Gideon has a spiritual inspiration by the angel of Yahweh. But he is not only not naive, he wants to be 150% sure that this is really the being that is speaking to him.
Right.
This is absolutely modern. I think we need this probing will today.
Right.
Many people don't have it.
Right.
I think he gives the angel of Yahweh about 3 tasks in order to prove to him that
he makes the proof.
That's modern. That's an amazing thing. So thank you for putting me to that. Gideon is a new hero in spiritual discernment. But you have another aspect of why he is so important.
Well, the question for each one of us is how? How do I proceed through a period of tsunami-like change with these kinds of influences going on? How do I do that? And the story of Gideon tells you a lot about how. And one of the things it tells you is, of course, in the story of Gideon, Gideon is asked by the angel of the Lord to throw the Midianites out of Israel. And the climax of the story is the Midianites are so evil and suspicious and hateful, they kill each other. And I think part of how means we need to not fight directly. You know, some people have it as a purpose to fight directly. So I'm not saying don't, if that's your purpose, don't do it. But for the most of us, what we need to do is we need to shun and withdraw. We need to pull away from the Midianites, and we need to trust if we provide healthy alternatives and we nurture the spiritual space of love and light, that the Midianites will kill each other. And I would say it, even as an investment banker, you can't run a planet without trust and collaboration. It's too big. There's too much going on. Now, they seem to think with AI and total digital control and mind control that they can run a planet with a relatively small group of people, but I just don't think it works. So my prediction is the Midianites will kill each other, but what we need to do is we need to encourage the conditions that show people that there is an alternative.
Exactly.
And as people walk away and shun the Midianites, just try to avoid them and get away from them, the Midianites will kill each other.
Yeah, exactly. And that requires, I think, the trust that evil is never absolute. It is created, it is admitted by the higher beings in the spiritual world. And that's why, in the end, it will destroy itself.
Right.
It will not destroy the higher good in the world. That's an important perspective.
Next is my interview with Patrick Wood on technocracy. In his writings on technocracy, Patrick describes the centralization of power into corporate and investment hands. I quote, "Today, 4 companies produce 84% of our beef. 4 companies control the world's grain market. 6 corporations control 90% of the media. 10 companies control everything you buy. 3 companies completely dominate the farm equipment market. 14 companies control the entire global auto industry. You get the idea. This extends to many different industries where giant global corporations are gobbling up everything in sight. How did we get to this point?" Technocracy is a global system designed to implement central resource management and control through rules-based micromanagement. The growth of technocracy is made possible by digital systems and software, artificial intelligence, and the one-way mirror managed through 24/7 surveillance by intelligence and enforcement agencies and their corporate contractors. Familiarity with technocracy is an essential knowledge for navigating the modern world and the increased workload and expense. I often call this shadow work.
So when Agenda 21 came along in 1992 at Rio de Janeiro, there were thousands of people that attended that meeting. There were hundreds of people that were involved in the discussions and stuff leading up to the language of the document, leading up to the actual adoption at the meeting. Some of those participants had other views of what happened in 1992. Two people in particular, I quote in my book, actual participants in the Agenda 21 process, Pradip Chatterjee and Matthias Finger. They wrote a book in 1994 called The Earth Brokers. It's a very important book. These two people were environmentalists of the old school. They already understood how corporatism was destroying the environment around the planet, and they were fighting against it.
Right.
That's why they went to Rio. But they came to Rio, they came away with a different opinion. So they wrote this book, and in their book, one of the most important conclusions that they made is this, and I quote, "We argue that UNCED has boosted precisely the type of industrial development that is destructive for the environment, the planet, and its inhabitants. We see how, as a result of UNCED, the rich will get richer, the poor poorer, while more and more of the planet is destroyed in the process." Close quote.
Right.
Now, talk about a contrarian view.
Right.
What they're saying is, and this is what I've contended for a long time now, is that this whole scheme to save the earth has nothing to do with saving the earth at all.
Right. It's the control and concentration of cash flow.
That's right. What the global elite are trying to do is capture the resources of the world, take them away from people like you and me.
Total top-down central control down to the molecular level.
Well, in the elite's mindset, the people are just a resource like trees in a forest or oil.
Right. They're trying to convert under the law and under the economy an individual human into a natural resource, just like a gas or oil deposit.
That's right.
Right. Well, I basically see these as all different marketing scams. You're trying to say, okay, what does the population, particularly the young people, care about? Okay, now how can we engineer that concern to give energy to take us where it is we want to go? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the young people to agree to wipe out their parents' and their grandparents' wealth and their inheritance and basically, destroy their own future. How do you do that? Well, you have to plug into what they care about, which is, they care about the environment and they care about inequality. And so you're constantly trying to hook those things and then turn it into marketing your scam.
Well, that's right.
In September, Rob Kirby and I sat down in Toronto to discuss inflation and the possibility of significant increases in the price of basic goods and services. Our concerns include deflationary pressures on incomes, as well as the non-financial steps taken to reduce financial inflation, such as debasement of product quality, the climate change op, and covert operations, all which increase our daily risks and costs. One way you can get everybody to radically reduce their living standards is with inflation and hyperinflation. But there's another way you can do it, which is an alternative. And that is to say, the end of the world is coming, so we need all these radical re-engineering things, and you've got to stop using air conditioning, and you've got to live in a smaller house, and you've got to, and this is all just a way of marketing an alternative to inflation. In other words, rather than let the financial mechanism signal the change, you come in with a demand destruction, which is done by political enforcement and regulatory authority. I mean, if you look at the first New Green Deal, it's basically How do we get a few people to take control of all the real estate and take it away from people?
Effectively, it puts a beard on inflation in making it not as observable.
Right.
Because it's increasing the government's take on the ever-increasing pie.
Okay, so I would say one of the biggest arguments that you're right about this vertical trajectory is the wackadoodle. Every time it gets more wacky, that to me is fear of the price mechanism and hyperinflation coming through.
Yeah. And in response to that, I would say, yes, things are getting wackier for sure. But as things continue to get wackier and wackier, things also become less believable. How much is too much? When do people say, like today, the Chapwood Index, which is a real on the boots on the ground measure of inflation, is 8 to 14%, depending on
not monetary inflation, but price inflation.
Yeah, price inflation,
right,
that people are experiencing in the real world.
Right.
So you can buffalo or make people believe that the inflation is 2% when it's 8 to 14, but it becomes a much stickier wicket when the actual inflation rate is maybe 16 to 24%. I mean, right. I wonder if the people in Venezuela believe inflation's 2%. In America, they do, or they accept it. But in Venezuela, that's a tougher sell.
One of the reasons I'm so worried about the debasement of the quality in the food supply is I think you're right in terms of the pressure. And one of the ways they can delay is to dramatically reduce the quality in the food supply as long as it looks like food.
Of course.
And that way they can keep the population eating and the corporate profits continuing.
That's a hedonistic adjustment that we call substitution.
Right. But I think the substitution in the food supply already has been extraordinary. But if you look at where it's going...
I don't like the direction we're headed in. I share that sentiment with you.
It's terrifying.
Of course. And I mean, if the price of steak gets too expensive, they'll tell us we can eat dog food.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Plant-based.
Right.
But understand the conditions under which we've been living for the past 10 or 15 years where, you made the point, we probably should have seen something looking a lot more hyperinflationary than what we've actually experienced. Right. A reason why it hasn't occurred because an awful lot of the dollars have been exported.
Right. Absolutely. And Middle East war is one way to do it.
Because, I mean, at least $7 trillion have been spent in the last 15 years blowing stuff up in the sand.
Then in October, Ulrich Groninger rocked our world with her blockbuster, The Mathematics of the Genetic Code, which inspires a complete change in our paradigm of who we are and where we come from. This discussion also introduces us to biophysics, understanding that can help you stay healthy and well in the new year.
These three properties describe a type of a chemical space. That's the term, not the use of the word space. And the set of 20 amino acids covers this space perfectly. They found that among 1 billion random sets of 20 amino acids, there is only 6 that have similar or better coverage of the chemical space in all of the 3 properties. They also found that other sets of 20 amino acids or even of less amino acids that contain at least 1 or 2 of our current coding amino acids would be much better in adaptivity than random sets that contain none of our 20 amino acids. And what is more, none of the artificial sets would use less energy for the same capacity as our natural 20 amino acids. This means that life on Earth has somehow chosen the best possibility among billions of different sets, and it may mean that life beyond Earth may look very similar or use a very similar set, a type of an amino acid language that is universal. One of the co-authors of the report saying, quote, Life may not be just a set of accidental events. Rather, there may be some universal laws governing the evolution of life. In a fourth symmetry, Sherlock discovered the number 37 as well as rotation in the following way. In the same way of counting the nucleons in standard blocks and side chains of amino acids, he is now looking at those amino acids that share two identical bases or letters. The total number of nucleons in the radicals of AA amino acids plus the total number of nucleons in the radicals of G amino acids amounts to 999. And again, the total number of nucleons in the radicals of T amino acids, as well as the total number of nucleons in the radicals of C amino acids, amounts to 999. The total sums of nucleons in the standard blocks of each of those four groups amounts each to a multiple of 37. 592, 666, 666, 666. And of course their total sums again are divisible by 37. What is more, if you look at the positioning of each of these groups in the table of the 64 triplets, you realize that the AA and G triplets and the T and C triplets are in an exact rotational symmetry to each other in the table. And finally, if you look at the sums of the nucleons in the radical of each of these double base groups, 535, 464, 547, 452, you arrive at the most amazing symmetry in the summation of these digits, both a symmetry as well as a cyclical permutation. Each of the sums, whether read from the left to the right or counted from the right to the left, and in each of the permutations of each of the numbers, gives you a triple of 666. By itself, it is a feat to find four different, seemingly unrelated numbers that in each of their permutations and sums gives you a triple of 666. But to have this number from the nucleons of atoms in molecules that make up the genetic code is mind-blowing.
Thomas Meyer, Patrick Wood, Rob Kirby, and Ulrich Oeniger, four brilliant and caring leaders working to help us build a human future. It has been a real honor and privilege to publish their insights in 2019 to support your free and inspired life. As we gather to celebrate the holiday season, make sure to check out our holiday greeting on the homepage. And if you're a subscriber, take advantage of your opportunity to give the gift, or send one of our holiday packages, and of course, enjoy the best of the Solari Report. Look for the best of the Solari Report, the wrap-ups, on Christmas week, followed by our 2019 annual wrap-up published throughout January 2020. Our theme, Deep State Tactics 101, the full 10-part series. Best of all, have a Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year.